There is a silence that only those who live alone truly know. It is not the silence of absence, but the silence of encounter. Alone, without a partner to distract or define her, a woman meets the one person she spent most of her life avoiding, herself. Society tends to paint solitary women as incomplete, as if without a man, their existence is somehow lacking. But Carl Jung teaches us the opposite. Individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, often requires precisely this solitude, where the soul is no longer diluted in the other, but finally faced in its fullness. The woman who chooses, or is led by life, to walk alone confronts not a lack, but an overflow. She is confronted by her own thoughts, her unspeakable fears, the repressed desires she once hid to maintain a relationship. In solitude, these voices rise like ghosts that can no longer be ignored. And what the world calls loneliness, Jung would call the sacred aloneness, the necessary separation for true transformation. Alone, she is no longer the daughter, the wife, the lover. She is herself, stripped of titles, roles, and masks. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." For many women, solitude becomes a return to this forgotten language, the language of the soul. Without the constant mirroring of a partner, she learns to see herself not through the eyes of others, but through the raw gaze of her own truth. And that is where the real journey begins. Not the journey of finding someone else, but the arduous, beautiful path of finding herself. Living alone forces a confrontation with the shadow, that vast inner territory Jung describes, where all that we deny and reject about ourselves is stored. Without the distraction of another, the mirror turns inward. She begins to see her impatience, her anger, her wounds, not to condemn them, but to integrate them. The woman who lives alone, if she dares to stay with herself long enough, is given the opportunity for a kind of liberation that no external relationship could ever provide. Today, I invite you to see solitude not as a void, but as a sacred container, a place where the woman, in her wholeness, is not waiting to be completed. She is unfolding layer by layer, returning to the self she was always meant to become. This is not a story about loneliness. It is a story about re-encounter, about the journey inward that only the brave dare to take, and that women who live alone are uniquely positioned to embrace. The weight of expectations. Woman without a man. From the moment a woman takes her first breath, invisible threads are woven around her, threads of expectation, tradition, and silent rules that dictate the supposed architecture of her worth. She is taught, subtly and persistently, that her value will be measured not by the fullness of her soul, but by the roles she can successfully perform: daughter, wife, mother, caretaker. And beneath all these roles lies an ancient, unspoken command: to not be alone, to seek, above all things, the validation of being chosen, of being needed, of belonging to someone. For centuries, this silent dictate has shaped the lives of women, making solitude not a choice, but a stigma. Carl Jung, in his exploration of the human psyche, warned of the dangers of living a life dictated by collective expectations rather than individual truth. He spoke of the self as a guiding force that demands recognition, even when it conflicts with societal norms. A woman who lives alone, then, becomes a disruption to this deeply embedded narrative. She refuses, whether by choice or by circumstance, to let her existence be defined by another's presence. And in doing so, she becomes a mirror that society finds uncomfortable to look into. A reminder that true fulfillment does not come from conforming, but from awakening. The world has many names for women who live alone: lonely, cold, selfish, incomplete. These are not descriptions, they are projections, the fears and insecurities of a collective consciousness that dreads the power of a woman who needs nothing but herself. They call her lonely, because they cannot imagine being alone without feeling empty. They call her cold because her warmth is no longer available to be consumed at will. They call her selfish because she chooses herself over and over again in a world that taught her that self-sacrifice is the highest virtue. But beneath these projections lies a truth that few dare to acknowledge. She is free. Freedom, however, is not without its cost. Living without the cushion of traditional roles means facing raw existence without anesthesia. It means dining alone, with one's doubts, sleeping beside unanswered questions, waking up to the echo of one's unspoken fears. There is no distraction, no external narrative to hide behind. Only the bare, often brutal, beauty of being. Yet it is in this very space that the alchemy of transformation happens. It is here, stripped of illusions, that the woman begins to distinguish between who she was told to be and who she truly is. To live alone without a man is not merely a social status, it is a spiritual journey. It demands the courage to disappoint expectations, to endure isolation not as punishment, but as purification. Carl Jung spoke often of the individuation process as one requiring solitude, for the path inward cannot be traveled with the crowd. The woman who dares to walk this path carries the weight of 1,000 broken expectations. And in carrying them, she breaks the chain not only for herself, but for all who will come after her. She becomes not a symbol of lack, but a lighthouse of authenticity, standing firm against the tides of convention. When the noise of the world fades and the comforting illusions are stripped away, what remains is the confrontation no one escapes, the meeting with the shadow. Carl Jung taught us that the shadow is not the enemy. It is the sum of all the parts of ourselves we were taught to fear, reject, and hide. Alone, without the distractions of companionship, a woman finds herself standing, face to face with this hidden self. It is a meeting not marked by drama, but by a profound, often disquieting silence. A silent awakening where the deepest truths are whispered, not shouted. The shadow holds the pain of every moment she silenced her voice to be accepted, the sorrow of every dream she postponed in the name of love, the anger she buried under smiles, the fear she cloaked in compliance. Alone, she cannot run from these ghosts. They emerge, not to punish her, but to reclaim their rightful place in her being. To integrate the shadow is not to defeat it, but to embrace it, to understand that what she once considered flaws are, in fact, fragments of her wholeness, waiting patiently to be seen and loved. This is the work of true solitude, to hold space for the parts of herself she once exiled, to sit in the discomfort of her own complexity without rushing to simplify it for the comfort of others. In this sacred solitude, she learns that the shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of strength. The anger transforms into boundary-setting power. The fear evolves into wisdom. The grief softens into compassion. She realizes that she is not broken. She was simply incomplete, living only half of her truth. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Alone, a woman can no longer afford the luxury of living only in the light. She is called to walk through the valley of her own darkness, not as a punishment, but as a rite of passage. She learns to hold her sadness without drowning, to face her loneliness without despair, to dance with her shadows without shame. It is in this quiet, often invisible labor that she awakens, not in a burst of light, but in the slow, patient dawn of self-acceptance. What society fears in a solitary woman is not her sadness, it is her awakening. It is the undeniable, unsettling truth that she no longer seeks permission to exist. She no longer asks to be chosen. She chooses herself. She becomes a living testament to the power of a soul that, having faced its own darkness, now radiates an unshakable light. And it is precisely in her solitude, in her silent awakening, that she finds what so many spend their lives chasing: freedom, authenticity, peace. There comes a moment in the solitary journey when the ache of loneliness begins to shift, almost imperceptibly, into something different, something richer. What once was an empty house becomes a sanctuary. What once was a deafening silence becomes a symphony of self. Solitude, initially feared as abandonment, reveals itself as presence. Not the presence of others, but the profound, steady presence of the woman with herself. And here, beyond the grasp of old longings and societal scripts, inner wholeness is born. Carl Jung would describe this not as a gain, but as a return, a homecoming to the self, the center, the totality of who we are. Not the fragments the world taught her to perform, but the deep, unified soul that existed long before she learned to compromise herself for belonging. It is in this sacred solitude that she realizes she was never truly alone. She was always accompanied by the parts of herself she had once neglected, now reclaiming their rightful place. This is the birth of an integrity that does not depend on external validation, a completeness that no relationship can provide or take away. Living without a man is no longer a statement of lack, but an embodiment of fullness. She understands that partnership, if it comes, is not a remedy for incompleteness, but a celebration of two wholes meeting without the desperate hunger to fill a void. She no longer seeks love as a lifeline. She offers love as an overflow. In the solitude that once seemed unbearable, she has cultivated a garden within herself, lush, resilient, thriving in its own right. There is a profound serenity that comes from realizing that no one else is responsible for her happiness, her peace, her worth. She has retrieved these from the hands of others and placed them gently back where they belong, within her own keeping. Jung's individuation process is, at its core, about this reclamation, becoming the custodian of one's soul. And in doing so, the woman who once feared the emptiness of living alone now sees it for what it truly is: sacred space for becoming. Beyond loneliness, there is life. A life that is not defined by societal expectations, not diminished by the absence of a partner, not fragmented by the need to be completed. It is a life lived from the inside out, deeply rooted, quietly powerful, breathtakingly authentic. And the woman who lives it becomes not just a figure of solitude, but a beacon of wholeness in a fractured world. The woman who has made peace with her solitude becomes something rare, something uncontainable. She no longer moves through the world seeking approval or permission. She walks with a quiet defiance, not loud or aggressive, but with the serene certainty of someone who has nothing left to prove. Her solitude has not diminished her. It has distilled her essence. Every step she takes is rooted, deliberate, heavy with the weight of authenticity. She is a force, not because she dominates, but because she refuses to be dominated, not by expectations, not by loneliness, not by fear. Carl Jung wrote often about the individuation process as a path of becoming whole unto oneself, and this woman embodies it fully. She is no longer fragmented by the demands of others or by the need to conform. She has reclaimed her shadow, woven it into her being, and in doing so has become vast. Too vast to be easily defined, too full to be easily dismissed. Those who encounter her sense it immediately. She is different. She does not beg for love, nor does she shrink to fit. She simply is, and that in itself is a radical act. To walk alone in a world that fears solitude is to carry a kind of dangerous freedom. Dangerous because it is contagious. Others see her and begin to wonder if they too might survive outside the cages they have built for themselves. She becomes a mirror, not reflecting society's expectations, but reflecting the truth that wholeness is possible, that a woman can be complete without needing to be completed. Her life becomes a living testament to the quiet revolution of the soul. the revolution that begins when one dares to stop running from oneself. This woman is not bitter. She is not hardened. She has not closed her heart to the world. She has simply rooted it in herself first. And because of this, she loves differently. She loves without desperation, without illusion, without bargaining. Her relationships are not based on dependency, but on resonance. She knows that true intimacy is born not from the fear of being alone, but from the freedom to choose solitude and still choose connection. The woman who walks alone has not abandoned the world. She has transcended its lesser demands. She knows that to truly belong anywhere, one must first belong to oneself. Her solitude is not an exile. It is a sanctuary, a throne she has built from her own bones, a kingdom she rules not with iron fists, but with the quiet, unwavering sovereignty of one who has made peace with every part of her being. She is not waiting. She is not seeking. She is, and in her being, she becomes an invitation for others to do the same. There is a profound difference between being alone and being lonely, a difference that only those who have traveled to the depths of themselves truly understand. Loneliness is the hunger for something outside of oneself to fill the void within. Being alone, in its sacred form, is the recognition that there is no void, only space. Space to grow, to breathe, to become. Space where the soul stretches its limbs and remembers its vastness. The woman who has embraced her solitude no longer fears emptiness because she has discovered that she is, herself, complete. Carl Jung taught us that the path to wholeness is not in seeking outward, but in integrating inward, bringing together the broken, forgotten, and rejected pieces of ourselves into a living mosaic of authenticity. The solitary woman has walked this path. She has danced with her shadow, conversed with her fears, and in the end, she has emerged not diminished, but amplified. Alone, she has found not isolation, but connection. Connection to the deepest parts of herself, and through that, to the greater whole of life. She does not see her solitude as a deficiency to be corrected, but as a temple to be honored. In a world obsessed with noise and distraction, she has learned the sacred art of silence. In a culture addicted to approval, she has chosen self-acceptance. Where others might see absence, she sees presence. Where others might sense lack, she knows abundance. She is alone, yes, but never lonely. For how can one be lonely when one has befriended the entirety of her own being? To walk this path requires a bravery that few possess. It demands the courage to let go of the life you were told you should want, in order to live the life your soul quietly longs for. It asks you to sit in the stillness, to listen deeply, to wait without panic for the voice that comes not from outside, but from the depths within. And in that voice, to find the affirmation that no crowd, no lover, no validation could ever provide: you are enough. You have always been enough. So if you find yourself walking alone, know this: you are not lost. You are not lacking. You are exactly where the deepest parts of you have longed to be. In solitude, you are not abandoned. You are being called back to yourself. And when you answer that call, you step into a freedom so profound, a peace so unshakable that no absence can steal it away. You are alone, but never, ever lonely. Close your eyes for a moment, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, what part of your soul is waiting for you to return home? If these words touched something inside you, I invite you to share in the comments. What have you discovered about yourself in solitude? Your voice may be the light that someone else needs to find their way home.